Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to have you all here. We should have a great conversation tonight. So glad to be here with all of you. Just trying to get back to slowing things down, but I still have plenty of things to discuss. It's going to be a great conversation tonight. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. We are going to have a great stream tonight. So let's go.
Of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Alrighty, everybody. So glad to have you here with us. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notifications bell so you get notified whenever we're going to do one of these. So glad to have you all here with us. The way these things tend to work, the way these streams work is that I give opening remarks that I have prepared. While I am giving those remarks, you all are sending super chats for what you want me to talk about in the second half of the show. So as those super chats come in, I will write them down. So you send in the super chats, I write them down. Then when my opening remarks have concluded, after that, I go from there to do the roll call. And we find out who is there on the other side of the camera, who's watching. And then after that, I answer super chat questions for the rest of the night. We usually go for about 2 hours, sometimes shorter, sometimes longer. I think the longest stream we ever did was 4 hours. And, you know, I do the roll call, I answer super chat questions. That's how it works. So if there's something you want me to talk about in the second half of the show, something that's on your mind, I will do my best to give you an answer. So that's how that works. Send me a super chat for the second half of the show. I'll be typing them down as we go along. So welcome, everybody. So, as you all know, I am still exhausted. This has been an awesome summer. We had an amazing Center for Political Innovation National Retreat gathering in Kansas that was very well attended. Great classes were given, a real bonding experience for the whole group, music and group bonding activities and talking about socialism and the future of this organization. Awesome. Then I went to Chicago to meet and spend some time with the Chicago comrades. We did some outreach. We got things ready for the Chicago conference. We got to go see Jimmy Dore. That was good. Met with people, networked with people. Then, you know, just before our big Chicago conference on August 6th, you'll know that the FBI raids came down on the Uhuru movement. And that was horrendous, and it was necessary to respond to that, and they appreciated our solidarity. And then we had our amazing conference on August 6th. August 6th, we had an amazing conference. A whole crew of people came in from out of town, worked really, really hard to make that conference happen. That conference, the videos are still being posted online. Just today, we posted Garland Nixon's presentation. Tara Reid, she spoke and gave a very powerful presentation. That's up online. Our opening ceremonies happened. Next speech to go up, I believe, is Dust James. We're still posting the videos of the classes that went on. Ryan Cotton gave a great class on China and socialism with Chinese characteristics. And, there's Lily, Comrade Lily gave a great class that was tremendous, and that's going up. And Tristan gave a great class. Parasocialite gave a great class about CIA manipulation of leftist politics. We're still waiting for some other classes to go up, and videos from the event are going up. And we have worked really, really hard to build the Center for Political Innovation. And this organization has come together, and it's really, really exciting. I'm not sure what, our next major thing will be. We do know that on August 27th, not this coming Saturday, but The next Saturday, 2 Saturdays from now, we're going to be having a national day of action for peace on the Korean Peninsula. That's not going to be too big of a mobilization. That will simply be the people around the country that are part of the Center for Political Innovation will be leafleting and have signs to raise awareness about the need for peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. It's going to be pretty cool. August 27th, you can see the call for actions on our website. If you're a CPI member, we'll certainly be talking about that on our national Zoom call that's happening this Saturday. We'll be talking about it. It's very important, this action that's going to happen around peace in the Korean Peninsula. And we're just going to keep going, and we're going to keep streaming. We're going to keep producing content. And, the Center for Political Innovation, we are marching ahead. People are joining. New memberships are coming in all the time, and we have withstood. They have come at us with everything they had. There was a huge effort to try and get us to cancel our conference that we had on August 6th, and it failed. They were not successful. And like I said, it's pretty clear that certain forces see us as a threat. Certain forces are going to try and do everything they can to smear me on a personal level, to attack me around my personal life, to make up things that aren't true, to take things that are true and exaggerate them and manipulate them. It's also pretty clear that, I'm on the Ukraine list of propaganda information terrorists, and there's going to be a huge effort to try and divide us from our allies, but we're just going to keep going. We're not going to back down. We are going to keep going because this message is too important. And look, we have withstood. We have gotten over hardship, and we have done great stuff this summer. I am so proud of every person who has helped us, because if it wasn't for the great people in our organization, we would not have been able to accomplish what we did. And we have really surged ahead as a group. And you learn by doing, right? Knowledge comes from correct, practical experience, as Mao Zedong said. And we are getting that. We know how to put on conferences. We did our conference in Austin in the spring, and now we did our conference in Chicago. We know how to put on conferences. The next conference we do, not sure where it's going to be, most likely the Pacific Northwest, but we don't know, no dates or anything like that. We're just waiting to get everything in order. It'll be much better, right? The more you do this, the more you'll learn. And we are going to keep doing it. Our retreats are going very, very well. And I'm continuing writing. I haven't had time to stop and write. And so now that I'm trying my hardest every day, I feel like I'm catching my breath. I'm trying to finish writing this self-help book I'm writing, How to Live a Revolutionary Life. And I'm working on that, and I'm having a great time writing it. And a lot of people enjoy the kind of self-helpy aspects of these lives. The fact that, we get into history, we get into economics and the workings of capitalism and socialism. We get into current events. We get into ideology and philosophy. But one of the neat things about these lives is that we help people get through the hard thing called living life, because living life under this system where people are alienated from each other, where it seems like there is at this point a big effort to just tear people down, it can be very difficult. And so I'm putting together this short book. Most of it's written already, but I'm going to finish writing it. How to Live a Revolutionary Life. That is going to be the next book that I finish writing. I think it's going to be helpful. We'll just have to see how it turns out. So our community is marching ahead. We're doing the best that we can, and these are scary times to be alive, right? Our government seems determined to push us to the brink of world war, and the capitalist system is reaching a prolonged crisis of overproduction. And this is a long-term capitalist crisis rooted, Popular Revolutionary Alternative in Venezuela. All right, writing it down. All right, and we are doing the best that we can do, and that's what I wanted to talk about on these streams, because this is an important book here. Right? There was a hit song in the 1970s. You're more than a number in my little red book. You're more than a one-night date. It was like a Motown song, and it was referring to like a date book, like a guy who's got an address book or whatever. But the Little Red Book, right? The Little Red Book by Mao Zedong, Mao's Twitter page, right? Mao's, quotations from Chairman Mao. This book originally started as, it was originally blue, and it was it was part of the military training kit of People's Liberation Army soldiers. They would get their gun, they would get their uniform, and then they would get a little book of quotations from Chairman Mao, because they felt like it was necessary to be clear that the People's Liberation Army was indeed a political army. It was not simply an army that, like the bourgeois armies claim they are not political. But the armies of the People's Republic made very clear that, yes, they were a political army. They served a political end. They were seeking to overthrow capitalism, to resist the imperialists, and that they were indeed a political army. And we know that the armies of the bourgeoisie, that they are, in fact, political as well, right? And that the Red Army and the People's Liberation Army in China made no bones about the fact that it was indeed a deeply political army. But there's a section of the Little Red Book, chapter 11 from the Little Red Book, that I keep referring to lately. It's called The Mass Line. The Mass Line. And I'm going to read to you from The Mass Line, because I feel like if people could grasp the content of this, right? If people could grasp the content of chapter 11 of the Little Red Book, of The Mass Line, things would be much better. Because we really need to keep this in mind. And as I'm writing this self-help book, it's ironic because I keep coming back to this and my presentation that I gave in Chicago, the speech I gave in Chicago. I kept kind of coming back to themes from chapter 11 of the Little Red Book, The Mass Line. Let me just read here. The people, and the people alone, are the motive force in making world history. Next quotation. The masses are the real heroes, while we ourselves are often childish and ignorant, and without this understanding, it is impossible to acquire even the most rudimentary knowledge. Next quote. The masses have boundless creative power. They can organize themselves and concentrate on places and branches of work where they can give full play to their energy. They can concentrate on production and breadth and depth and create more and more undertakings for their own well-being. And then there's the quote that I've quoted over and over again. The present upsurge of the peasant movement is a colossal event. In a very short time, in China's central and southern and northern provinces, several 100 million peasants will rise like a mighty storm, like a hurricane, a force so swift and violent that no power, however great, will be able to hold it back. They will smash the trammels that bind them and rush forward along the road to liberation. They will sweep away all the imperialist warlords, corrupt officials, local tyrants, and evil gentry into their graves. Every revolutionary party and every revolutionary comrade will be put to the test, to be accepted or rejected as they decide. And there are three alternatives: to march at their head and lead them, to trail behind them gesticulating and criticizing, or to stand in their way and oppose them. And every Chinese is free to choose, but events will force you to make the choice quickly. The high tide, next quote, the high tide of social transformation in the countryside, the high tide of cooperation has already reached some places and will soon sweep the whole country. It is a vast socialist revolutionary movement involving a rural population of more than 500 million. And it has extremely great and worldwide significance. We should give this movement active, enthusiastic, and systemic leadership and not drag it back by one means or another. Some errors are unavoidable in the process. This is understandable, and they will not be hard to correct. Shortcomings and mistakes among cadres and peasants can be remedied or overcome, provided we give them positive help. Yeah, this is the mass line. And this is something that I think a lot of people who get into communism, who get into Marxism, really have a hard time grasping, because it's not an obvious concept. But that second quote that I read to you, I remember reading this quote and being kind of perplexed by it. What is he saying here? The masses are the real heroes, while we ourselves are often childish and ignorant. And without this understanding, it is impossible to acquire even the most rudimentary knowledge. What does this mean? What is Mao actually saying when he says that? The masses are the real heroes, and we ourselves are often childish and ignorant. This points to the fact that, yes, you, me, those of us watching this stream, we have an understanding of world history that is unique. We understand the objective laws of history to some degree or other. We understand historical and dialectical materialism. We understand that civilization is constantly marching forward to a higher plane, from hunter-gatherer civilization to slavery to feudalism to capitalism and ultimately to socialism. We understand that there's the capitalist class and the working class, and they're struggling against each other for power. We understand these things. And with that understanding, yes, we are more, quote unquote, advanced in our understanding than average people are. But that doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be the average people who create socialism, not us. And that seems very contrary to the way a lot of people feel. A lot of people have this attitude that it's like, oh, the masses are a bunch of sheep, they just go along with however things are going. We're the ones, we've awakened, we've woken up, we've taken the red pill, we've put the glasses on, we know the truth. That's not exactly the Marxist understanding, okay? There's elements of that. We do see things more clearly than the masses do in non-revolutionary times, sure. But that doesn't matter, because ultimately the masses of people will be the ones to make the revolution and not us. And ultimately the masses of people are going to be far more brave and far more heroic than we are. All that we can hope to do is to give direction to the huge momentum that already exists in society. Historical forces are much bigger than we are. All we can hope to do is, with our revolutionary knowledge and our understanding, to try and nudge things. It's like, you got to imagine there's a giant boulder rolling down the mountain, right? There's this boulder rolling down the mountain. We're not going to get in the way and stop that boulder. It'll crush us. And we're not responsible. It's not like we're pushing the boulder. We don't have the strength. It's gravity that's pushing the boulder. What we have the ability to do as revolutionaries, all we have the ability to do is, when we see that boulder coming, to position ourselves to nudge it so that it rolls down the mountain with all the momentum in the right direction. That's the role that revolutionaries and communists can hope to play in world history. It's like people look at Marxism and they say, well, it's economic determinism and it's historical inevitability, right? It's all just going to happen, Caleb, right? The workers are going to be oppressed, and they're going to realize it's in their economic interest to overthrow the capitalists, and they're just going to do it, right? And these things are just going to happen, right? And the capitalist system is going to enter a crisis. The workers are going to resist. If you read Marx, there's a way of reading Marx that makes it sound like there's no point in us being here, right? It's all just going to happen, and that's not correct. That is not a correct reading of Marx, because clearly, as Karl Marx wrote, men make their own history. But they do not make it in circumstances that they choose, right? They make it with the circumstances that exist. However, as the big historical forces and circumstances exist all around us, we have the ability to intervene. And so you have one school of thought that is not correct, that says there's nothing we can do about it. Historical inevitability. It's just going to happen. Well, that's not correct. However, there's another school of thought, which is much more prevalent, which is the voluntarist school of thought, that says we're going to do it ourselves. This is really common, right? The idea that we will do it, right? That we are just going to get together and through our willpower, we're going to force socialism into existence, right? That's not correct either. We don't have the ability to do that. The forces of history, the millions of people, billions of people in the world, the global economy, these things are much beyond our control. But we know that as a result of the objective laws of history, as a result of the built-in mechanisms and problems of capitalism, eventually that boulder is going to start rolling down the hill. And as that boulder starts rolling down the hill, we're going to have the ability, as that boulder rolls down the hill, to nudge it in the right direction, because we understand where that boulder is coming from. and we understand where that boulder is headed. We understand why it has so much momentum. We understand gravity. We understand history. We understand speed. And we will have the ability, with our objective understanding of history and science, to say, okay, now this boulder is rolling down a hill. We didn't start the boulder rolling down the hill. We didn't start it rolling down the hill. And we're not pushing it, right? That it's the momentum of gravity that is pushing it down the hill. All we have the ability to do is to push that boulder, to nudge the trajectory of that boulder in a direction where it can hit in the right place and it can change the course of history. And that's really what we have the ability to do. The masses of people are that boulder. The masses of people are the boulder. And they will be responding to objective conditions. Things that we don't create. Things like the failures of the capitalist system, the momentum of the capitalist system moving toward fascism and war, divisions in the ruling class, oppression. The masses of people are going to be responding to real conditions and circumstances. All we will have the ability to do is give the guidance that will give the huge surge of mass popular power the ability to actually move in the right direction. That's really all that we can do. And that's what Mao is getting at in the Little Red Book, right? Mao Zedong, when I read that quote about the peasant uprising, that peasant uprising that Mao saw in the Hunan province was going to happen anyway. Mao didn't make that happen. A lot of people have it in their heads that Mao just showed up in villages with a gun and said, all right, peasants, revolt. And they said, oh, this guy named Mao, he showed up with a gun. He told us to revolt. That's not how it happened. The peasants were revolting anyway, right? There was a whole pattern in the history of China of a cycle of peasant wars and revolutions that was happening in feudalism. 30 years before Mao was born, there was something called the Taiping Uprising. The Taiping Uprising, a mass peasant rebellion, peasant war that happened. And you can bet it had a huge impact on Mao. The fact that when the Chinese Communist Party took power, they built a monument in Tiananmen Square. And one of the historical events commemorated on that monument are the Taiping Uprising. Mao understood that this was a cycle, that every 100 years or so in China, there was a huge peasant rebellion. And that and when he goes to Hunan in 1927, he sees, okay, the conditions are ripe, and this happened 100 years. This happened 30 years before I was born. Like 100 years ago, this happened, and this happened before, and it was like a cycle. That when conditions got to be a certain way, that the feudal system started to come apart, and the people would rebel. And Mao said, okay, that boulder is coming, right? The people are going to rise like a mighty storm. This is where the action is going to be, and if we position ourselves in the right way, we can intervene in this huge, colossal rebellion that's going to happen, this mighty storm, this hurricane that's on the horizon. We can intervene and make it effective. And the heroism of that rebellion is not going to come from the communists. Sure, the communists are going to do heroic things, but it's going to be those peasants as they rise up against their landlords. It's going to be those workers fighting the bosses. That's where the heroism is going to come from. And they're going to have courage and bravery that we in our intellectual revolutionary abilities can only dream of. They're going to do things that are far more creative than we can imagine. They're going to do things that are far more bold and daring than we can imagine, right? They are going to be unleashed to do amazing things. And all that we can really hope to do is with our revolutionary politics and with our understanding of the objective laws of history, we can intervene and we can push these forces into a revolutionary direction. That's what Mao is saying, right? And he's not of the illusion that it's just going to naturally happen. Yes, there's going to be a natural rebellion. That's pretty clear. But it's not guaranteed where that rebellion will lead. But he's also not falling into the illusion that they're going to do it themselves. They're just going to say, "Oh, we're going to do it. We're going to do it." No. Right? He's got this understanding that yes, men make their own history. And yes, there is a role for individuals, but they make it by giving voice to historical forces that are already there, to broad sentiments that already exist among the masses. This is the brilliance of Mao Zedong thought, the brilliance of the mass line, the brilliance of What Is to Be Done by Vladimir Lenin. If you go and read What Is to Be Done by Vladimir Lenin, he critiques bowing to spontaneity. And he says, yes, the workers are going to rebel against their unjust conditions. And yes, there's going to be strikes and protests. However, it is our job under such circumstances to intervene and push it in a direction that can actually change the course of history. That is ultimately what Mao is saying. And it's a brilliant understanding, because again, you get some people that say it's beyond our control. It's all just going to naturally happen. And that is the mindset, I guess you could say, of forces that you might call revisionist, or forces that that just forces that they essentially are forces that just don't really want to struggle. The forces that just say it's just going to naturally happen. There's nothing we can do. It's nothing we can do. This is just how these things naturally happen, and history is just going to take its course. So you have that, right? And then on the other hand, you have those forces that just say, just vote for the Democrats. It'll happen gradually, one step at a time. It's just going to sort of gradually happen. There's nothing we can do. That's CPUSA, Committees of Correspondence, those folks, right? That they basically just want to go along and with forces that already exist. There's already this thing called the Democratic Party, and they'll just kind of go along with it and, hope that it leads somewhere good, because, that's what they can offer. But then you have other forces, ultra-leftist forces, some of these Maoist groups, some of these anarchists who have it in their mind, we're going to do it, right? We're going to go out and we're going to do something revolutionary. We're going to beat people up. We're going to break some windows, and we're going to be, and we're going to do, and it's like, that's not correct either, right? That colossal events like revolutions are made by huge forces of history, but they tend to involve people making themselves an object of history and deciding to intervene. Men deciding they're going to make their own history. They're going to give up the tailism. They're going to give up the bowing to spontaneity. They're going to become a voice for mass sentiments, and they're going to push that boulder, that colossal force, that boulder. They're going to push it in the direction that the momentum that it has can lead to something greater. This is the mass line, and it's not a simple concept. It's really not a simple concept. This is hard for us to understand, right? What is our role as revolutionaries? We don't make the revolution for the masses. We simply give direction to the revolutionary energy that's already there. And this is an important understanding that revolutionaries have to develop, and it's not simple stuff, right? This is advanced. It's very, very advanced. That you have to see sentiments that exist among the population, among the broad masses. You have to see things that people really, really want. That's what you have to do. You have to give voice to the broad masses of people, and you have to give expression to forces that already exist, and you have to understand the objective laws of history. So there you go. All right, was Perestroika a form of Marxist market socialism? Very good question. Wrote it down. If anyone has any super chats, I spend the second half of the show answering your super chat questions generally. That's what I wanted to say about the mass line. And again, these are not easy concepts for people to understand, but I also want to talk about a couple things that I think are important that I just want to mention here tonight. Again, I'm not giving you all some big fiery speech tonight. I'm explaining some concepts. I'm helping you understand some things. I'm doing what I can to give insight and food for thought, and present things in an objective way. But there's one thing that I have been doing for the past 4 years. Well, maybe the past 5 years. Probably about 5 years I've been doing this now. That has made an amazing difference in my life. And I know it sounds stupid. It sounds really, really stupid when I tell people this. A lot of people hear this and they roll their eyes. They think that's cuckoo. They think that's cuckoo. And I'm just being real with you. I mean, this has made a huge difference in my life. A huge difference in my life. What I have done is I wake up every morning, and as soon as I wake up, I put on Mozart, Beethoven, Bach, Haydn, Handel. I put on classical music. And every night before I go to sleep, I get into my bed and I take out my phone and I put on Beethoven, Bach, Mozart, Handel, Haydn, classical music. And people think of that and they hear that and they think that's dumb, Caleb. That is really, really dumb. Well, I mean, if you think that's dumb, good for you. Don't do it then. I mean, there's no one making you do that. But here is why that has made a difference in my life, right? And this is key to understanding how the human mind works. And this is something, again, maybe you don't agree with me. You don't have to agree with me. I'm just telling you why it has made a difference, okay? We all have this thing in our chest. It's called a heart. And your heart is going bub, 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 bub. It's a rhythm. All day long, whether you are hearing it in your mind, if you're thinking about it, if you're feeling your chest or not, your heart is going bub, 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 bub. There's a rhythm going on inside your chest all day long. Right? Inside your chest all day long, there is rhythm taking place. Meanwhile, you have these things called lungs. And again, you're not thinking about it. It's happening without you thinking about it. But your lungs are breathing in and they're breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. It's another rhythm that you have deep inside of your body. So you got two rhythms going on in your body all day, your heart and your lungs. In addition to that, you got your veins, you got, there is patterns and rhythm going on inside your body all day long. And so to think that music doesn't have an impact on your body, on your mind, is very naive. The type of music that you consume, the type of music that you listen to has a huge impact on you, a huge impact on who you are, right? I mean and it's much deeper than like any memory that might come up if you listen to a certain song, much deeper than any association you have with lyrics. Oh, it's far deeper than that. Your mind and your body are affected by the rhythms around you. And it should be. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. That's what gives life beauty, right? It's things like art, things like music, things like poetry. I mean, paintings, colors, nature affects us all. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But the reason that I make a point of waking up every day with classical music, going to sleep every night with classical music, is because classical music appeals to you differently than non-classical music does. I mean, it appeals to you if you listen to Beethoven, you listen to Mozart, you listen to Bach, you listen to Handel, you listen to Haydn. It appeals to you on an intellectual level. The notes are mathematical, they're patterns, and it appeals to you on a level that is not sexual. A lot of music, right? Listen to Wagner, listen to rock and roll music, you listen to a lot of music. A lot of music is about climaxing, right? It's about anticipation and climax, right? And it's very enjoyable. Look, I mean, I love Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin, but that song is all about anticipation and climax. That's what they're doing, right? The thing is, right, the whole universe, when we really get down to it, is a combination of two things: patterns, and chaos. The sun comes up, the sun comes down, the tide comes in, the tide comes out. Spring, fall, summer, winter, there's patterns all around us, but every day is also different. Every day that you've ever had. Look, I know that tomorrow is Thursday, and every Wednesday in my life, it's late Wednesday night. Every Wednesday in my life has been followed by a Thursday, but that Thursday that follows is going to be unlike any other Thursday in the history of the world, and it's going to be followed by a Friday. And that Friday that follows is going to be unlike any other Friday in the history of the world. Patterns exist, but within the patterns, there is variation, right? If everything was completely predictable, we'd become bored with everything, right? I mean, the world would just be boring because we could predict everything. So there's the stability and the patterns, and there's the variation. And it's this relationship between pattern and variation that gives beauty to the world. You could say the world is like one gigantic symphony. The world is like one gigantic symphony or one gigantic song with patterns, with variations, and that's the beauty of the universe. Patterns and variations. But right now, we are entering a period of crisis where the capitalist system is coming apart. And on top of that, mass marketing has learned to appeal to the sexual, libidinal parts of us, right? When Freud talks about libido, he's talking about sex drive and the drive toward aggression, right? Your anger, your rage, and your sex drive are connected, right? We've known this for years. What are you currently reading these days? Your anger and your sex drive are connected. And it seems like most music, most art nowadays is appealing to your libidinal drive, your anticipation, your pent-up rage, your libidinal release. That's what it's appealing to. And that's very attractive to us. It's very, very attractive to the human mind, right? We want that libidinal release. We want to, get pumped up. We want to release, that's what we want. But if you're trying to be clear, you're trying to think clearly, you're trying to not let your emotions consume you. If you're doing that, you need to, on some level, program your mind away from that way of being. Look, I see the way people are. I see that so many people are just not happy. They're depressed. They're angry. They're rageful. They're hopeless. And I think it is connected to the mass media that surrounds us, the music that surrounds us, the television programs that surround us, the stuff on our phones, on our social media. It is all very, very libidinal. It's all about releasing rage, releasing emotions. And in order to try and keep a clear head, in order to get through life and make clear, objective decisions, you need to, on some level, program your mind to appreciate another kind of beauty. And when I tell people about this, that I develop this kind of ritual, right, where I wake up every morning with classical music, I go to sleep every night with classical music. A lot of people say, well, that sounds boring. I say, it sounds so boring, Caleb. It just sounds so boring. That's the point. It's boring because your mind has been programmed to appreciate things in a certain way. Your mind has been programmed to appreciate things that are libidinal, things that are explosive, things that are climactic. And because of that, when you hear Beethoven, you're going to be bored. You're just going to be like, this isn't libidinal. This isn't climactic. I'm not getting anything out of this. But if you can learn to do this, if you can force yourself to do this, you can suddenly start to notice and see beauty beyond libidinal stuff, beyond libidinal release, beyond the rage, beyond the explosions, beyond the sex, beyond all that, you can start to see beautiful patterns, and you can notice beauty, and you can experience beauty in a different way. By waking up every night, every morning, waking up every morning with classical music, going to sleep every night with classical music, and gradually learning to appreciate the beauty of classical music, and reprogramming your mind to some degree or other to like classical music, to like Mozart, to like Beethoven, to like Bach, to like Mozart, to like Handel, to like Haydn. In order to do that, when you reprogram yourself where you're listening for the patterns in those notes, and you're enjoying the patterns and the variations, right? Because that's classical music, right? It's there's patterns and variation. And you're appreciating the patterns, and you're appreciating the variation, and you're appreciating what the composer is doing. If you can come to appreciate music in that way, you can change part of your mind to not be centered around explosive emotions, but to appreciate another kind of beauty, and to think in a more clear-headed way, to think in a way that's more rational, where you're not as easily manipulated. Because it seems like that is what goes on so much in our society, from all sides, from the so-called left, from the so-called right, from the mainstream media, from movies, from television. It's all about getting you to feel very extreme emotions and manipulating those very extreme emotions. And if you really want to understand the way the world works, and if you really want to think about how you can maximize your potential to make a difference in this gigantic world all around us, you have to figure out the art of reprogramming your mind to appreciate patterns, to notice patterns, and to notice the beauty of variation within patterns. Like this is what I'm talking about. It's actually very interesting. Now, classical psychoanalysis, we're talking Sigmund Freud stuff. We're not even talking like, people that continue the Freudian tradition. We're talking strictly Sigmund Freud. It says there are two forms of mental illness. And I think this is the thing about Freud, is that everything that Freud said that was right, no one gives him credit for it. And everything Freud said that was cuckoo, that's what we identify him with, right? We identify Freud with penis envy, and and the Oedipus complex, and poop, and child stages about pooping, and so all this stuff that when we think of Freud, we think of all this cuckoo stuff, right? And a lot of what Freud said was pretty cuckoo. A lot of what Freud said was pretty cuckoo. However, all the stuff that writing it down, all the stuff that Freud came up with, there's a lot of stuff he came up with that is just common sense. Talk therapy. No one had ever done that before, right? The whole going and talking to a mental health professional about your problems, nobody had ever done that before. Talk therapy was invented by Sigmund Freud. No one thinks talk therapy is crazy. Oh, that's nutty. No, talk therapy is a widely accepted, widely accepted practice. Well, Freud invented that. Subconscious, right? The idea that you have feelings and emotions that you're not fully aware of. You have memories that you're not fully in touch with, right? You have a subconscious. That's Freud. Freud was the first person to ever talk about the subconscious mind. We don't give him credit for that. Everyone knows there's a subconscious. Everyone knows talk therapy is a thing. Everyone knows there's a subconscious mind. Well, that's Freud. Freud came up with that, and so, there you go. Okay. All right. All right, writing it down. And Freud came up with that. And so Sigmund Freud, in addition to a lot of the things he says that are very crazy, there's also the things that he said that are considered to be basically common sense among people that do psychological work. And one of the concepts that Freud developed is he developed this understanding that there are two forms of mental illness. And I think he's absolutely right about this, because it's very clear there's mental illness and there's mental illness, right? There was somebody in my life who I was very close to who became schizophrenic. And I watched him become schizophrenic, and it was deeply painful for me to see. It was someone I was close to, someone I did political work with, and I was very close to him. And I watched him become schizophrenic. That's watching someone become schizophrenic, and completely lose touch with reality. That teaches you something. There's a lot of people who are like, oh, my friend's crazy, he's depressed. Or, oh, my friend's angry all the time, he's crazy. It's like, no. There's people that completely, when people become schizophrenic, they lose touch with reality. They are not processing information in the correct way. They are completely gone. And I saw that happen in a friend, and it was heartbreaking to watch. But then that's when I realized, like, there's mental illness and then there's mental illness, right? A lot of people are depressed. A lot of people have anger issues. A lot of people this or that. But when I saw this friend of mine become schizophrenic, this person I had done political work with, who I felt very close to, that was a whole nother level of mental illness. That was psychosis. And this is what Freud understands. He says there's two forms of mental illness. There is neurosis, and then there is psychosis. And they're very, very, very different from each other. And he's right. Almost everyone is to some degree or other neurotic. Everybody is neurotic to some degree or other. Neurosis means that there are patterns in your life that you do not pick up on and you do not acknowledge, right? It's that whole thing about making the same mistake over and over and over. You don't learn from it. All of us, to some degree or other, have certain neurotic patterns in our lives. There are certain things we do where we make a mistake and we don't learn from it, and we make a mistake and we don't learn from it, and we keep making the same mistake again. And that happens in relationships. That happens in social interactions primarily. It happens in the way we start to think about the world and our relationships, etc. And that's everybody. Now, obviously, there are people that are more neurotic than others, right? Addiction is a classic form of neurosis. The person doesn't want to be using drugs or using substances or gambling the way they do, but they get into a neurotic cycle where they're just doing, they feel this compulsion and they make a same decision. And that addiction, right, is a classic form of neurosis, where there's something where the person makes the same mistakes again, right? And people that are struggling with addiction, what they're trying to do is break out of the neurotic pattern, right? That there's this way their mind has been programmed to operate, and it keeps getting them nowhere, and they're trying to break out of a neurotic pattern. People that are very depressed, right? Again, it's a neurosis, right? One thought leads to this thought, one behavior leads to this behavior, one interaction leads to this interaction. They see themselves in certain ways. They're stuck in a neurotic pattern, and everybody, to some degree or other, is neurotic. There's nobody who's not a little bit neurotic, okay? Some people are very, very neurotic, and some people are only a little bit neurotic, but everyone's more or less neurotic, okay? That's neurosis. And what neurosis is that you are not noticing patterns. There are patterns that go on in your life. There are patterns that go on in your thinking that you are not aware of. You have not observed them. Very important. You have not observed those patterns, and you've not made yourself aware of these patterns. And as a result, they continue, and you continue to suffer because you are not aware of these patterns. That's almost like every person on the planet is to some degree or other neurotic. That is not the same as psychosis. And psychosis is something completely different. And that's when people do the opposite. They start seeing patterns that are not there. The world is so scary to them. And they are so afraid, and they are so terrified, and they are so upset that they suddenly start to see patterns that are not there. And they start writing a fictional narrative in their head to try and make some sense out of the world. The world is so terrifying to them that they start saying, it's the space aliens that are following me around, and they suddenly, in their mind, as a defense mechanism to try and protect themselves from their pain, to try and stabilize the world that they're afraid of, they withdraw from reality, and they start inventing hallucinations. They start seeing things that aren't there. They start thinking things that are not the case, right? And that is deeply sad. I mean, you see a homeless person walking down the street talking to themselves. That's psychosis, right? They are not in touch with reality. I mean, one thing I do with my job, right, is I don't do it as much anymore, but I used to go out on the street and interview people, right? I would just interview people on the street. And I mean, you get all kinds of people that you interview, all kinds of people you can interview on the street, and you ask them their opinion. But homeless people, you can't interview them because, you ask a homeless person, the homeless person stops, and I say to the homeless person, okay, so what do you think of Donald Trump and his policies? And they say, in China, the trains have water on the floor, and that's a big problem because of boogeyman. And don't you know what I mean, brother? And I say, what? And then they get angry. They say, I told you what I think about Donald Trump is that in China, the trains have water on the floor, and that's a big problem, and the boogeyman. And I'm just like, it doesn't make any fucking sense to me what they say, because they're psychotic, right? And they're not hearing the question correctly. They're not hearing the question, what I'm saying. And they think what they're saying to me makes sense. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense, right? It doesn't make any sense to me, but in their minds, what they're saying makes sense. And they get very frustrated with the fact that I don't know what they're talking about when they're talking about the trains in China have water on the floor and the boogeyman. I don't know what they're talking about. But in their mind, that makes perfect sense. And they're angry. They're frustrated with the fact that I can't understand, because they have this alternate reality that they have created in their mind as a defense mechanism. That's psychosis, right? That's severe mental illness. That's a completely different thing, right? And, psychosis can be induced by hallucinogens in some cases, right? It can be people that, they take a lot of hallucinogens and suddenly they're always tripping, and, but in a lot of cases, it's just, it's a person who is just stressed out, overwhelmed psychologically, and this is how their mind chooses to deal with it. But the point is that neurosis and psychosis, neurosis, which is everyone to some degree or other is neurotic, and psychosis, which is very, very intense, both of them are rooted in patterns. Both of them are rooted in patterns, which is patterns are super important to human beings. Like I told you, your heart, right? Your heart is beating all day long. Your lungs are breathing in and out all day long, right? The sun goes up, the sun goes down, the tide comes in, the tide comes out, spring, fall, winter, all these things are super important to human beings. Patterns and variation within patterns, right? This is a really, really important part of what it means to be a human being. And so if you're going to try and live your life to the highest potential, and if you're going to try and keep control, you have to make a decision to give yourself some grounding. And that's what this classical music ritual that I do every morning and every night does. It's about taking control of the patterns that are all around me in order to try and bring some stability to my mind and my system, right? And break out of the libidinal, explosive emotions that are all around us, right? It's about, making a conscious decision. And it's pretty wild because, all of us are being brainwashed by our phones, by social media, by Facebook, by Twitter, by mass media, you walk into a store, they've got music playing, there's advertising everywhere. All of us are being brainwashed. All of us are being brainwashed all the time. We are all being brainwashed all the time. There are subliminal messages being thrown at us. There's advertising being thrown at us. There's emotions being thrown at us. We are being brainwashed all the time, right? What those of us who are revolutionary should be striving to do is to brainwash ourselves and say, this society is trying to brainwash me. This society is trying to control me. No, I am going to make a conscious choice about how I want my mind to function. I am going to make a conscious choice about what music I listen to. I'm going to make a conscious choice about what books I read. I'm going to make a conscious choice about what media I choose to listen to and what media I choose not to. It's the opposite. It's about it's really about individualism. You're saying, no, I'm not just going to go along with the brainwashing that's already there. I am going to make a conscious decision that I'm going to listen to these media outlets. I'm going to listen to the classical music when I wake up and go to sleep at night. I am going to look into different news sources. I'm going to read these books. I am going to be the driver, right? Because it's like we're all in a car, and that car is going someplace. But really, when you become a revolutionary, it's really you're saying, I am going to drive my own car. I am going to decide how my mind is influenced. I'm not just going to be influenced by whatever's out there. I'm not just going to be influenced by whichever way society is moving in. I am going to actively take control of my own mind. And I am going to make a decision to hitch my mind to the direction that I want it to move in. It's actually one of the most empowering things. It's really one of the most empowering things. When you say, this is my mind. This is my mind. I am going to decide what goes into it. I am going to decide what media I consume. I'm going to decide what music I consume. And I am going to actively start driving my own mental car. I am going to do that. That's actually, it's the opposite of totalitarianism. They're always saying that we're communists, we're totalitarian, we're mind controlling, we're authoritarian. That's the opposite. We're saying to you, you take control. You make the decision. Don't let them do it. Don't let our de facto rulers do it. That's the crazy thing about all of this, right? Is that the way Western liberalism and capitalism rules, it's this de facto rule, right? Venezuela has always had a military. Venezuela has always had a business community. Venezuela has always had a police force. But according to the Wall Street Journal, the Venezuelan police force and the Venezuelan military used to be independent. But then Hugo Chavez took control of these independent institutions, and now it's a dictatorship. Well, wait a second. In the 90s, when Venezuela was deeply poor, when people were starving on the streets, were the police independent? Was the military of Venezuela independent? No, it was serving U.S. imperialism. So it wasn't independent. It was just de facto serving the powers that be. Well, then the Venezuelans said, no, we're going to drive. And Hugo Chavez got in there. He was democratically elected, but then he started to assert control over the military, assert control over the economy and the oil sector, assert control of the police. Now suddenly it's a dictatorship. Why? Because it's not just rolling over and letting them de facto rule. And this is how Western liberalism works, right? I'm here at saying, hey, listen to classical music every morning when you wake up. Listen to classical music when you go to bed at night. People are hearing that and saying, oh, Caleb, these brainwashing people. No, you're just supposed to let iTunes and Spotify de facto decide what music is best for you. I'm saying you should make a decision about what is best for you. And they're saying, how dare you get in the way of just rolling over and letting iTunes and Spotify decide what's best for you. You see, that is how this works. You know, when I was in Iran, I remember having a conversation. I had a conversation, and they were talking about how in Iran, they don't have a full, total democracy. In Iran, they have elections where everyone gets to vote, but before those elections, they have this thing called the Guardian Council. And the Guardian Council vets the candidates to make sure that they are in line with the Islamic Revolution and its principles. The Guardian Council, you know, all the major candidates come to them and they judge them. And if they are in line with the Islamic Revolution and its principles, then they approve them and they run for office. A lot of people look at that and they say, oh, it's ridiculous. Why can't the people just vote for whoever they want? Well, the thing is, we have the exact same thing in America, except it's not the Islamic Revolutionary Guardian Council who picks the candidates. It's the people with the most money. It's the corporations. It's the media. It's the big banks. It's Wall Street. They pick the candidates for us. That's just objective fact. But it's not codified into law. It just kind of happens because they have all the money. So it's totalitarian when Iran makes a conscious decision. It says, we had the Islamic Revolution. We believe in, you know, not capitalism, but Islam, war of poverty against wealth, you know, the Shia Islamic revolutionary principles. So we are going to take control of our politics. We're going to set up mechanisms by which no one's allowed to run for office unless they adhere to our revolutionary principles. That's dictatorship, we are told. In America, where it's just, hey, anyone can run for president. Anyone can be, you know, run for office, but, oh, you just didn't happen to raise enough money. Oh, CNN's not covering your campaign. Best of luck next time, buddy. Not our problem. That's just it. When it's de facto authoritarianism, de facto rule, that's okay. It's totalitarian, it's authoritarian, it's brainwashing when people actively decide to reject the de facto rules. And that's how this game is played, right? As long as you're not asserting any control, as long as you're just rolling over and letting the forces that already have the wealth and the power, you're letting them rule over you, they're never going to call you brainwashed. They're never going to call you authoritarian. They're never, I mean, if Iran were to just sit back and let whoever run and the imperialists could pump money in and get, the candidate that they wanted, and they would never call Iran authoritarian. They'd say, wow, Iran is a democracy, but because Iran has said, no, we are having our Islamic revolution and all of that, it's a different kind of thing. This is how it works, right? Is you're supposed to accept the de facto rule, right? And that this applies on an individual level, right? I mean, when you make a decision and say, this is how I'm going to live my life, right? How is that totalitarian? It's the opposite of totalitarianism, but it's what they really don't want you to do, right? If you do that, if you take control of your mind, if you take control of your life, that scares the shit out of them. That really scares the shit out of them. It really scares the shit out of them. I mean, that's look, at the end of the day, to have real power, and this is something that took me a long time to figure out. You might hear this and you might laugh about it, but if you want to have real power, you got to have power over yourself. At the end of the day, the only person you can ever really control is yourself. But if you can really control yourself, you can have full control over yourself. You are one of the most powerful people ever. You can control your impulses, control your emotions, control your thoughts, control your mind. If you can control yourself, you can be more powerful than anybody. Think about it. If you can actively say, my mind is mine, my body is mine, I am going to do this, and then you do it, that is power. That is power. That is real power. That is real power. If you can control your own life and your own mind and your own body, you are very, very powerful. And that's just something I've been thinking about. I'm writing this short little, how to live a revolutionary life, and these are some of the concepts that I'm talking about here. So I hope that was helpful to people. If not, that's fine. But there you go. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Always appreciated. And now we'll do the roll call. Names and locations. I will call people out as I see them. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. I will call you out as I see you. Names and locations. Who's with us? Who's watching tonight? Names and locations. We got Ryan in Oakland. We got smash the like button. Very, very good. Ryan in Oakland. Phil in Miami. Kakalaki, which is slang for North Carolina and South Carolina. We got John Whitty in Houston. Mark in Tacoma. Catherine Crosby in Springfield, Missouri. Anthony in Fort Worth, Texas. Sid from Delhi. Maddie in California. Mark in Utica. Richard in Woodland, California. Brad in St. Louis. David Rennie in Hamilton, Ontario. Josh in St. Louis. Kinky in Los Angeles. Tim, or in California. Joshua Tree. Tim in St. Louis. We got Melbourne in Australia. Kinky in Joshua Tree, California. We got Mindanao to Midwest. Olympia Logic. We got Jenny Lynn from Cincinnati. We got Tyler in Salem. Shout out to you, Tyler. Go subscribe to Tyler's YouTube channel. It's a lot of fun. Balthazar in Oakland. Fremont, California. Cumbria, the United Kingdom. Bob from Long Island. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. Bob Troy in New York. Big D in Kentucky. We got Quanos, pronounced Kronos. Yvonne from Hanoi. We got Steve and Ann in Georgia. Welcome, Steve and Ann. Glad you're with us tonight. Glad you are with us. We got Johannes from Rotterdam. We got Lori in Arkansas is with us. We got Micah from Las Vegas. Micah is with us. Very, very cool name, Micah. We got Krista from North Carolina. Krista is with us. Shout out to you, Krista. We got Yada Yisrael in Chicago. We got Alexis in Rochester, New York. We got Chris. Oh, Krista already did Krista. Alrighty. Waiting for more names. Waiting for more names. We got Mike in North Carolina. We got David Fox in Bendigo, Australia. Jason Hunt in Chicago. We got Debbie in Napa. We got Jamie in St. Paul. We got Carmen in Reading. Olympia Logic, Mindanao to Midwest, Fremont, California. Very, very good. Very, very good. Very, very cool. We got Cleveland Pirate Alex, Mo and Danielle from Pomona, California. We got White Mountain, Arizona. We got Noblesville, Indiana. We got Fields of Spring, Stuart Edwards. We got Crystal in Washington State. Shout out to you, Crystal. We got Benjamin Rubenstein in Nicaragua. Ben is an awesome investigative reporter. He's done great stuff for Mint Press. Go check out Ben Rubenstein's work. Great guy. Great guy. Proud to call him a friend. We got Stuart Edwards. We got South Africa in the house. Kagasi is with us. Very, very good. Very, very, very good. So good to have you all here. Names and locations. Names and locations. I'll keep calling you out as I see you. Names and locations. Who do we have with us tonight? We got Chester, Ian Foster in England. We got what do we got here? We got Kieran from San Diego, and thank you for the super chat, Kieran. Thank you for that super chat. We got Sean from Phoenix, Arizona. Right? We got John McCarthy. Shout out to you, John. It was great seeing you at our conference. John is a great guy. Great guy. We got T from China. Wow. Shout out T. It's been too long. T is awesome, by the way. T is a really good friend. I go way back with T in China. So shout out to you, T. I'm so glad you're watching tonight. So glad that you're here. All right. All righty. Very, 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 very good. Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. If you have more super chat questions, right. All righty. Okay. So now the first super chat question is about the popular revolutionary alternative. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the popular revolutionary alternative of Venezuela is the ultra leftist alternative. It's like the leftists who are critiquing Bolivarianism, right? Yeah, and I was right. I thought that's what it was, and I see that's what it is. And I'm not a big fan. I mean, I'm not a Venezuelan, and I don't know, exactly the particulars of every situation in Venezuela, but I know the U.S. imperialists are up against the Venezuelans as hard as they possibly can be. I know that Maduro is the leader of the Bolivarian socialist movement, and I know that that Maduro has held the country together. They've pushed the collectivos and the cooperatives. They've maintained their socialist economy again in so much attacks. And, in every socialist country, you always have this group of people, that like the revolution has happened. The government is fighting the imperialists. It's building socialism. And then you always have this group of people that are like, you're doing it wrong, And I'm not a big fan of those people usually. Now, I'm not saying that's what these people are. I think some of them are people that their criticism is very new. I think and I don't know the internal dynamics, but let me just put it this way, that I feel like if you're a serious revolutionary organizer in Venezuela, you're most likely going to be in the PSUV, the PSUV, the United Socialist Party. Right. And and the same for Iraq, Syria. If you were a serious Marxist in Iraq, you really wanted to get things done, you would join the Ba'ath Party. Even if your feeling was more like pro-Soviet, you were going to join the Ba'ath Party because they were the ruling party. Same in Syria, right? And that, after the Russian Revolution, if you were serious, you joined the Bolsheviks because they were the party that did it all. Originally, in the Soviet Union, there were three parties, right? There was the Bolshevik Party, and then there was the Left Menshevik Party and the Left Socialist Revolutionary Party. But pretty soon, all the serious people joined the Bolsheviks. And then the people that were kind of like, you're doing it wrong, they joined the Left Mensheviks. They joined the Left Socialist Revolutionary Party. And eventually those parties got outlawed because they were just kind of a collection of naysayers. And you always get people like that, right? In any socialist country. That's not to say that there's not room for legit criticism of the PSUV and Maduro. But I always, again, if I were interested in learning about the building of socialism, would I read something by this popular alternative or whatever, or would I read something by Maduro? I would read Maduro. I take Maduro much more seriously than I take these people. Now, are they full-on counter-revolutionaries, or are they kind of critical from the left, but they'll defend the revolution? I don't know the exact details, but there you go. There you go. All right, next question. Was Perestroika a form of market socialism? It was, right? Perestroika was in the 1980s. You had the death of Brezhnev, you had the death of Yuri Andropov, and you had the rise of Gorbachev. And Gorbachev came in and attempted, he implemented two reforms, Perestroika and Glasnost. Perestroika was market reforms, market liberalization, and Glasnost was political openness, political reform, allowing non-communists into the government. Now, neither of those things are inherently wrong, okay? I mean, I obviously don't think there's anything wrong with market reforms, and I obviously don't think there's anything wrong with having non-communists in the government. However, the Soviet Union, the way the Soviet Union had developed, right, is that it had become very, very rigid. You had, 1928, ultimately you had the solidification of the Soviet system, what they call really existing socialism, the defeat of the Trotskyites, the defeat of the Bukharinite right opposition. And then you had World War II, where 26 million people in the Soviet Union died. I mean, massive deaths and suffering. And the Soviet system became very, very rigid. Very, very rigid. And they needed to change. And Gorbachev came in there and tried to change it. And the process of trying to change it, the whole thing came apart. Right? If you can't bend, you break. And that's what happened, was that the Soviet system was too rigid. It was unable to bend. And so he came in there and he tried to bend it, and it broke, right? And that's what you need to understand. There's nothing wrong with market reforms. There's nothing wrong with political reforms in socialist countries. But if you have a system that is so rigid and so incapable of reforming that you'll try to bend it and it just broke, right? And that's what happened, right? Is that the Soviet system, Roger Kieran, the author of Socialism Betrayed, which is a very good book I recommend you read. There's speeches by him online. Roger Kieran, he always makes the point that the Soviet Union needed to change in the 80s. That's pretty clear. The Soviet Union couldn't continue the way they were going. They needed to change. But the way the Soviet system had developed, the change that came broke them apart, right? And one of the brilliant things about the Chinese Communist Party is that they have the opposite. They are not rigid in the same way at all. They are constantly changing. Like, they are constantly testing out new policies in a local area before they apply them in a national area. The Chinese Communist Party is always adapting and changing its policies. The way they were in the 50s was not the way they were in the 60s. The way they were in the 60s was not the way they were in the 70s. The way they were in the 80s is not the way they were in the 70s. It's the way they were in the 90s, not the way they were in the 80s. They're constantly, the Chinese Communist Party is constantly reinventing socialism with Chinese characteristics. If you read, this is the 3-volume ideological history of the party I have behind here. Very, very worth reading. And they make that point throughout the book, that the definition of socialism and their understanding of what socialism ultimately means for China has changed a lot over the course of the revolution, right? And that the Chinese Communist Party, the brilliance is their ability to adapt and to change. And that's why, often when people talk to me about socialism and they ask me, like, what will socialism be like? They'll ask me silly questions. Caleb, will we have amusement parks in socialism? Maybe. I don't see why not, but could a country be socialist with no amusement parks? Yes. Could a country be socialist and have loads of amusement parks? Yes. Does that have anything to do with whether it's socialist or not? No, right? That socialist systems have very different incarnations. The Paris Commune, the first working class revolutionary government ever, was very different than what the Bolsheviks did in 1917. What the Bolsheviks did in 1917, if you got to 1928 and the rise of Stalin and 5-year plans, it looked completely different. And in the 1960s, what Khrushchev was doing was completely different. And in the 1980s, what ultimately they were doing with Perestroika looked completely different. What Mao did in China looked very different than what Fidel Castro did in Cuba. And that socialism is not, there's not like one set way that socialism has to be. The difference between socialism and capitalism is this. Capitalism means profits in command. Capitalism is a system where production is organized for profit. That's what it means. And socialism is when society comes together to take control of the means of production. When the capitalist mode of production, when production organized for profit is abolished and society takes control of the means of production, the economy is organized and forced to work in the interests of society overall, that's socialism. And socialism is going to work and look differently. Look at what they got in Nicaragua with their micro entrepreneurs program. Look at Venezuela. Look at Vietnam, their socialist-oriented market economy. Look at China, socialism and Chinese characteristics. It's very different. And if we're serious revolutionaries, we should be trying to figure out how to mobilize the American people to bring into being a uniquely American form of socialism, a form of socialism that will address the contradictions of our society, that will function here. How can we take control of the means of production here in America and make it function for the benefit of society? That's what we should be trying to do. And that's what I formed the Center for Political Innovation. That is what we aim to do. We aim to look at American society and try to figure out ways that the momentum, the revolutionary energy of the American people can be mobilized in such a way that we can get American socialism and we can get a society where the means of production are controlled by the people. We break apart imperialism and the profit-centered exploitation of the world, and we have a rationally organized economy to address and make living standards better and make life better for the people here in coordination with the rest of the world, trading with the rest of the world, right? We need to figure out how to move towards some form of socialism with American characteristics. We need people to join the Center for Political Innovation. I'm putting the join link in the chat right now. We need you to join, right? Right now, the Center for Political Innovation has roughly 229 members, I believe. We need there to be a lot more. We have the goal of 1K by May. And we need more people to sign up. It's $10 a month to join the Center for Political Innovation. So if you are liking what you're hearing and you can afford $10 a month, then we'd like you to join the CPI. We'd like you to become a dues-paying member of the Center for Political Innovation. And you can be a member of another party. You can be a member of the Communist Party, the Democrat Party, the Republican Party, the PSL, the ISO, the QWH, the XYZ. If you like what we're doing, you want to be part of our work, become a dues-paying member. We can plug you in with a local. We can invite you to our national events. You can come on our national Zoom calls. We have Zoom calls every Saturday. I'd like you to join, right? We ought to have more members at CPI, right? And these are tough times, and people need each other. They need a community. So please, I'm going to put the join link down here below. Please join. Please join the CPI. So please join the Center for Political Innovation. All right. Next question. What do I think of the Solidarity Union in Poland? Well, look, I'm not saying this is in the 1980s, Solidarność or Solidarity, right? It was a group of dock workers in Poland, and they had grievances against the Soviet government or the socialist government, right? That they had grievances against it. And some of their grievances were probably legit. There were probably ways in which the Polish Marxist-Leninist government was unjust or mistreated people or made mistakes. There were probably ways that the Soviet Union intervened in Poland that maybe left a sense of resentment among the population. So none of that, I'm not denying any of that. What I am saying is that the Solidarity Union, which was directed by J. Lovestone and was directed by the CIA and the Federation of Free Trade Unions, it was anti-communist in its essence. It was anti-communist. The leader of the union, from what I understand, was anti-Semitic, and they held on to an anti-Russian, anti-Semitic narrative. It was like these kind of like far right-wing Catholic folks that have anti-Semitism, and ultimately they played a role in dismantling socialism in the former USSR and in Poland, right? And the economic results for Poland of dismantling socialism were not good. Look at the 90s in Poland. When the socialism came apart in Poland, it wasn't good. So while they may have had legit grievances about the way the Soviet government treated them, and while I don't want to, take away from that, what was ultimately the result of what their CIA-backed, US-backed labor union that fought against socialism achieved when they brought down Marxism, Leninism, and brought down the Marxist government of Poland? Was it good for the Polish people? No. Objectively, no, it wasn't. The fall of socialism in Poland brought in neoliberalism. It was a disaster for the people of Poland. It just wasn't good for them. So, ultimately, I'm not a big fan of that labor union, right? I'm just not a big fan. All right. What are you currently reading these days? Well, geez, what am I reading? I'm reading Rosa Luxemburg. I've got a compilation of her writings that I'm studying. In addition to that, I am rereading, I'm trying to finish The Destruction of Reason by George Lukács, which is the critique of Nietzsche that was put forward by the Hungarian Marxist George Lukács. I'm trying to complete that. I do have a compilation of Gus Hall's writings that I've been kind of going through again. I have the book Basics by Gus Hall, Basics for Peace, Democracy, and Socialism. I've cracked open, I've been going through the ideological history of the Chinese Communist Party. Yeah, I hope that's helpful. Those are a few of the things I am reading these days. But there you go. There you go. All right. Next question. What about Beethoven meets disco? What is Beethoven meets disco? I don't know what that is. I really don't know what that is. Is that like a disco Beethoven or something? I'll have to listen to it. It's like fusion, an attempt to combine classical with disco. Might be entertaining, might be worth listening to. Not against it. Might be amusing. Haven't listened to it. The next question claims that one person who's anti-imperialist is making about another person who's anti-imperialist. Look, all right. Look, I'm not even going to get into that. And I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. Okay. I don't follow these two people closely enough. And I got to tell you something. I just want you to hear me. If you hear me say this, you need to hear it. You need to hear this. They are doing everything they can to get those of us who support Russia and support China and are opposed to their drive for World War III. They are getting everything. They're doing everything they can to get us to fight each other right now. It is horrifying to me. It's utterly horrifying. Okay? You have no idea what happened before the conference that happened in Chicago. And I'm not going to get into that, but you have no idea. The sinister forces in this world are pulling out all the stops they can to break apart the anti-imperialist bloc that is emerging. And there's not many of us, those of us who say Russia is not our enemy, China is not our enemy. We don't agree with each other. Some of us are hardline communists. Some of us are libertarians. Some of us are anarchists. Some of us are just social critics. Some of us are talking about vaccines. Some of us aren't. Some of us are trying to keep one foot in the movement and be part of leftist stuff, and some of us aren't. And some of us believe certain things about sex, and some of us don't. And some of us, are Christians, and some of us are atheists, and some of us are for abortion, and some of us are against it, and some of us are for gay marriage, and some of us are against it. And they are doing everything they can to try and get us to fight each other right now. And I ain't taking the bait. I ain't taking the bait because I know they're coming for all of us. They are doing smear pieces on all of us. They are smearing all of our names. They are calling us all nasty names. They're calling us all Nazis. They're calling us all fascists. They're calling us all conspiracy theorists. They want to ban us all from social media, and that's what they're trying to do. They are trying to break us apart. You don't know how many times I get messages. Oh my God, Caleb, did you see what Haas just said? I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck what Haas just said. Oh my God, Caleb, did you see what Jackson Hinkle and Samira just? I don't give a fuck. I don't want to hear your gossip. I don't care. Yeah, a lot of people that are spreading the truth about Russia and China think things about world history or about world events that I don't agree with. That's true. Right? That is objectively true. There are a lot of people, right? To that, I wrote a brief response and we'll post it below in the comment section of this video. I appreciate it if you responded, if you have the time. Thank you. Okay, I don't know what that means, but there are a lot of people that are anti-imperialist. I heard that, the flag ceremony that we did at our CPI event, I think it was great. I think it was great, but I'm open to doing it differently, right? CPI is a group. It's not just one guy. It's an organization. Some people want to do it differently. Maybe we'll do it differently. But I mean, I heard that there's some people in the more libertarian camp of pro-Russia, pro-China stuff that are like, ooh, we don't like that. That looks authoritarian. Well, you didn't come to our conference either. You weren't there. So I guess you saw the video and didn't like it. Sorry, I can't help you there, and I'm sure if you guys, you libertarian anti-capitalists, right, or you libertarian anti-imperialists, if you have a conference, you're going to do it differently. Good for you. You know what I mean? I mean, and I would go to your conference, and I wouldn't try to make you do the flag thing at your conference, because I understand that you're coming at this from a different perspective. But look, they are trying to get all of us that are anti-imperialists, Jackson Hinkle, Haas, Jimmy Dore, they are trying to get all of us to fight with each other, and they're digging up dirt on people, and they're spreading rumors about people, and they're jumping into people's streams and saying, did you hear what so-and-so, and they're trying to sow discord. And while I'm at it, watch out for the app called Discord. Watch out for the app called Discord. It's called Discord for a reason. Discord is not a good thing. It's literally called Discord. And that app, Discord, is really good at creating Discord. I had Discord for a while, and I don't have that app no more. Now, I understand there are people in CPI that get on Discord. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but be very careful with the app called Discord, because it's very good at creating discord. And that seems to be the goal. They really want to get us to fracture among each other. Thoughts on those of us like me planning to flee to Nicaragua or a communist country because they're completely sick of capitalism? Well, look, Kinky. There are a lot of expats around the world. You go to China, right? Teague, who's watching, can probably tell you all about it. There are loads of expats in China, and there are American expats living in Nicaragua. A lot of them. Some of them have been there since the 80s. There's older, like boomer kind of people that are living in Nicaragua, and you're welcome to do that. But my feeling, I will never forget, Frances Dostal, the woman in her 80s who recruited me into the Workers' World Party. Her parents had been in the Communist Party USA. She'd been a founding member of the Workers' World Party, and she had this Brooklyn accent. She talked like this. Caleb, have you sold any newspapers today, Caleb? An adorable old woman. And I remember that when we would be out doing revolutionary stuff, this 80-year-old woman, whenever somebody would say to her, why don't you go to Cuba? Why don't you move to Cuba if you're a communist? Why don't you move to the Soviet Union if you're a communist? She'd say, well, they have plenty of good communists over there. They need me to be here. They need us here. And, that's about the best response ever, right? They got plenty of communists in Nicaragua. They got plenty of communists in Venezuela. They got plenty of communists in Vietnam. But they need us here. So that, when people say, why don't you move to some other country? No, I mean, they don't need us in other countries. They need us here. Communists here are like gold. There's a reason that communists around the world pay so much attention. The communist groups in America are so small and so weak, but we fart, and the communists in Vietnam are reading about it. They're like, oh yes, the Communist Party USA farted on day 14. I'm exaggerating, of course, but it's like the amount of attention that communists around the world pay to what we do here is massive, because everything we do here as communists in the belly of the beast really matters, right? Everything we do, it has a huge impact because we're in the center of the empire. If we have 4 people in New York City with a sign, we get 4 people with a sign that says hands off North Korea, there's a good chance that'll be on North Korean television. You know that? There's a good chance that that there's that they're investigating it and finding out about it, right? We are in the center of the global financial imperialist system, and what we do really, really matters. It really, really, really matters. It really, 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 really matters, right? So, that's why when it gets down to it, yeah, if you want to relocate, if you think that's the best thing for you to do, Kinky, you're welcome to do that. There's no law that says you shouldn't do that, right? But I feel like the role that I have decided to play the role that I can objectively play as I think about what is accurate, what can I actually do, right? I'm not going to create the storm, right? But it's not just going to happen. Things don't just happen by themselves, right? Men make their own history. But as being somebody who's decided to make myself an object of history, someone who's trying to intervene in the historical process, what can I do? What can I do? Right? I feel like it's my job to remain here. That's what I feel like it's my job to do. I feel like I should remain here. I should do the best that I can here to try and build a revolutionary organization. And everyone has to figure out what role they can play. The Internationale, that's the theme song of international communism, right? Everyone knows the first verse. And first of all, so there's like the British words, and then there's the Billy Bragg words, which I hate. I hate the Billy Bragg words. But then there's like the original American version of the Internationale. Arise, ye prisoners of starvation. Arise, ye wretched of the earth. For justice thunders condemnation. A better world's in birth. No more traditions chains shall bind us. Arise, ye slaves, no more in thrall. The earth shall rise on new foundations. We have been not, we shall be all. Well, the second verse of the Internationale in American English, right? The American version of the Internationale, not the British one, not the Billy Bragg one, which makes me want to vomit, but the second verse of the American version of the Internationale, it goes like this, right? We want no condescending saviors to rule us from the judgment hall. We workers ask not for their favors. We must consult for all. To make the thieves give up their booty, to free the spirit from the cell. Each must ourselves decide our duty. We must decide and do it well. Now, there's two particular themes in that verse, right? The part about free the spirit from the cell. What does that mean? It means that capitalism and the irrationality of this system is preventing human beings from being what we are meant to be, right? It means that capitalism is keeping us caged in primitivism and greed and all of that. And that our goal, we're not trying to enslave people. We want to free the spirit from the cell. We want to let humanity blossom into what it's meant to be. Caleb, love your talks. I've seen your stuff, but got hooked after that Michael Crichton video. Well, thank you very much. I'm really glad you liked it. Yeah, it's one of the better pieces. To free the spirit from the cell, to allow human beings to blossom into loving, creative creatures they really can be, to do technology beyond anything we can imagine, right? That's to free the spirit from the cell. That's very important because that's what we're trying to do. And then the next lines, we must ourselves decide our duty. We must decide and do it well, meaning that as much as this is collective, as much as this is all very collective, at the end of the day, you have to figure out, what am I capable of? What contribution am I able to make? What can I do to help the revolution? Right? And at the end of the day, no one can make you do very much. I mean, you might, who knows, there might be some kind of revolutionary crisis where you get drafted in the army or something, but at the end of the day, what can you do for the revolution is something you have to figure out. What am I willing to do? What risks am I willing to take? What sacrifices am I willing to make? How much am I willing to contribute? That is a fair question, right? We must ourselves decide our duty, but we must decide and do it well, right? That's kind of what Mao is getting at when he says, every Chinese will be free to choose, but they will have to choose quickly, right? And that this is a journey that we all kind of have to figure out, right? So that's my answer to that question. All right. The next question I've got here is someone says, what is my favorite Morrissey song? What is Morrissey? I'm sorry. I'm really bad at pop culture. I'm really, really bad at pop culture. I really, really am. I really do apologize. I don't know my pop culture like I should. I don't know what Morrissey is. Does someone in the chat want to explain to me who Morrissey is? Who's Morrissey? Why should I know what their songs are? Who is Morrissey? I don't know who that is. So I don't know who that is. I'm sorry. I'm a nerd. I'm a complete nerd when it gets down to it. I'm thinking about communism and politics all day. And so there you go. Someone said the Smiths. Is that like a punk band from the 80s? Right? I don't know. It's an 80s thing. Okay, well, I feel better. See, I was born in 1987. So that was a popular song before I was born, probably. So I feel better. What's my favorite Morrissey song? I don't know. I don't know Morrissey because, it's like that blind spot, right? I don't know if you ever remember this, but it's like, so when you're in school, you always learn about history like till right before the time you were born, right? For me, the 80s was my blind spot, right? I read about the 60s, right? And I knew the current events from like the 90s, but the events that happened, like I didn't know who Oliver North was. I didn't know who Oliver North was until I was a freshman in college. Did you know that? I had no idea about Oliver North and Iran-Contra. Why? Because I was born in the middle of it. That all happened while I was being born. So I didn't know any of it. I didn't know any of it because, it was like you have that blind spot. It's not history because it's too recent, but you didn't live through it, so you don't know about it, right? And the 80s, for me, that was kind of my blind spot because I was, and maybe younger people like the 90s is like that. But yeah, I didn't until I was a freshman in college. When I was a freshman in college, I learned what Iran-Contra was. I learned who Oliver North was. I didn't know any of that, right? I barely knew anything about Ronald Reagan. I knew he was like a Republican president. And like starting when I was in high school, there started to be like a feeling that Ronald Reagan was a good guy. They were kind of eulogizing him. Ronald Reagan died. I remember watching Ronald Reagan's funeral on TV, and it kept going, and it kept going, and it kept going, and it kept going, and yeah, I remember that, I don't know, what is it? I remember the only thing I remember from Ronald Reagan's funeral is that somebody made a corny joke. I think Bush was president at the time, and Nancy Reagan was sitting there, and someone said, I used to tell Ronald Reagan, for a couple of Irishmen, we sure married up, and everyone laughed. And then George Bush turned to Nancy Reagan and was like, that's all I remember about that. So I don't know. Ronald Reagan. I didn't know Ronald Reagan, right? I will say one thing is that, and this is something that I've been revisiting a lot, but it's like we're living under Biden is Jimmy Carter 2.0. He is a degrowth liberal, right? A synthetic leftist president who's with the oil companies. He's with the big oil companies trying to wreck the U.S. economy. And that's what Jimmy Carter was. I mean, Jimmy Carter was with the same big oil companies, the Rockefellers. I mean, his whole presidency, thank you, Catherine, his whole presidency had been selected from the Trilateral Commission, which was a think tank created by Zbigniew Brzezinski and Henry Kissinger with Rockefeller money, like the money of like David Rockefeller. And it was a degrowth administration. They were all about, let's wreck the U.S. economy. Let's drive the oil prices up and try to maximize our profits. Let's deregulate the lending of money. And it was, but it was, they did believe it was Jimmy Carter was the first American president to meet with gay rights activists. He was the first American president. He sponsored, like the government sponsored this big women's rights convention that they had in Texas somewhere. And it was like, it was sponsored by the government, this women's convention that they sponsored to like promote feminism. And, Jimmy Carter was the synthetic left, cultural issues, right? But, and then when the economy was getting worse, he got on TV and he said, owning things and having things is not going to make you happy, and when the price of heat in the wintertime was going up, he started wearing a sweater and he said, I'm wearing a sweater. Instead of turning up the heat, Americans should wear a sweater and that's what we can do. We can wear a sweater. And he wore a sweater. He wore a cardigan sweater, right? I mean, it was just like Jimmy Carter was I want America to be more poor, because having things and having stuff is a problem. And there are too many people in the world. I have commissioned the Global 2000 report that has concluded that us human beings are a cancer on Mother Nature. We need to drive down the living standards. I mean, that was Jimmy Carter, right? He was everything everyone loves to hate about liberals. And he actually launched, many people don't know about Jimmy Carter, he launched Abscam, which was he sent the FBI after the people in his own party that wanted to fight against austerity, right? They were the smokestack Democrats. They were these Democrats. A lot of them were tied in with the Teamsters Union, and urban Democrats, Italian guys. A lot of times they were Italian. A lot of times they were Irish. And he sent like the FBI to have a guy dressed up in like an outfit. If you ever see American Hustle, it's like a fictionalized version of it. But they had an FBI guy dress up like a sheik from the Middle East and try to bribe these guys. And he framed up a bunch of these guys in his own party who were like pro-union because they supported nuclear power and they weren't going to go along with his, his degrowth policy. So Jimmy Carter was doing basically everything Biden's doing right now, escalating tensions internationally, driving up the oil prices, deindustrializing the country, inflation, it's like the same kind of shit, all to serve big oil, high oil prices, all of this, right? And out of that, you had Ronald Reagan come in, and Ronald Reagan was he was like a revolt by those lower level capitalists. And when Ronald Reagan first came in, he was like almost kind of far right. He was almost like a John Birch Society guy. Now, when he got into office, shortly after Jimmy Carter became president, he got shot. I'm sorry, shortly after Ronald Reagan became president, he got shot by John Hinckley. And John Hinckley, was found not guilty for reasons of insanity and has been held in a private mental health facility. But yeah, it's a wild story. Are you familiar with Italian writer Gianni Rodari? I've never heard of him. Ronald Reagan got shot, and he was shot, and and the shooter, John Hinckley, people have looked into John Hinckley's ties to the Bush family and to big oil in Texas, etc. And John Hinckley, he was found not guilty. How do you shoot the president and be found not guilty? That doesn't happen. He was found not guilty for reasons of insanity. And he's been in a mental health facility, for the rest of his life. And his family were very, very wealthy Texas oil people who just happened to have some shady business connections with the Bush family. He supposedly did it to impress Jodie Foster or something like that. And, very shady. And he's now, apparently they've released him of everything, but he's not allowed to give any interviews and explain why he did it or say anything like that. Very, very shady. But regardless, so Ronald Reagan was shot. He became kind of just a regular conservative, right? That he became kind of just a conservative, a regular conservative. At first, he was kind of like a Trump. He was one of these far right rebels against the establishment. Then after that, he kind of moved into being kind of just a regular conservative. But it was a very, very strange incident. Ronald Reagan was kind of like Trump in a way. It was like lower level capitalists revolting against like the degrowth policies of the ultra rich, right? That Carter had very much been a representative of the ultra rich who wanted to degrow and just degrow and deindustrialize the United States, maximize oil prices, reduce the population. It was that Malthusian ultra rich faction. That was who was with Carter. And Carter, the Brzezinski folks, the Trilateral Commission. Reagan came in as a repudiation of that, and it was lower level capitalists basically, and they were rising up against him. Clinton came into office. Clinton was not Carter. Clinton was something different. We didn't see the return of like a full on Malthusian presidency until Obama. Obama was very much of that Carter school. Obama, he comes out of Columbia University, and it's that international school at Columbia University. That's where Brzezinski taught foreign policy, right? Obama got his college education from Brzezinski, more or less, right? He was studying at the foreign policy school that Brzezinski set up. The Biden administration is very much, it's one of those Malthusian degrowth, synthetic left administrations where it's super woke and progressive on paper, but their policies are make everyone poorer to protect Mother Earth, drive up the oil prices, secure the monopolies of the ultra rich, and beat down the lower level capitalists who don't want to go along with that, right? And then these lower level capitalists, a lot of them are like libertarian. They want total unregulated capitalism. So it's like, do you have the state and the monopolies regulating degrowth, or do you just let the corporations do whatever they want? Well, neither. Ultimately, we want socialism. We want the banks and the factories and the industries to be controlled by the people. And we want then rational economy to unleash growth and lead us to a society of vast abundance where inequality can fade away with a centrally planned economy. That's what we want. But what ultimately needs to happen, and I've said this on many, many live streams, and I'll say it again, what ultimately needs to happen is that the labor movement in the United States and the unemployed and working families of the United States and the small business owners of the United States and the lower level capitalists of the United States ultimately need to realize that the future that they have, any future that they have, is going to mean aligning with Russia, China, Venezuela, and Iran against the ultra monopolies. That the ultra monopolies that are destroying the United States are also trying to destroy Russia, China, Venezuela, Iran, Cuba, etc. And that there needs to be an anti-imperialist bloc, kind of like how in China Mao formed a bloc of 4 classes. There needs to be a bloc in the United States that's labor unions, people like Chris Smalls and the amazing labor work at Amazon, fighting the big monopoly Amazon, small business owners, working people, and communities that are devastated by unemployment and inflation, etc., and the gas prices. We need to form an anti-imperialist bloc in America against the big monopolies. That's what we need. Ultimately, the overwhelming majority of America has an economic interest in resisting the big monopolies and restructuring the U.S. economy to trade with Russia, China, Venezuela, and Iran and be part of the Belt and Road Initiative, right? That's what we ultimately need, right? China is rising. Russia is rising. Venezuela and the Bolivarian alternative of Latin America is rising. There is an alternative economy that is rising. Capitalism and the unregulated, chaotic free market capitalist system is declining. And that we need there to be an anti-imperialist bloc, a united front against the imperialists has to emerge. And it'll be based on this is in the economic interest of the United States. It'll make life better in America. But really, and ultimately to impose it, you're going to need state power. It'll require government control of our oil and gas, government control of banking, government, imposing an economic bill of rights, government mobilization for infrastructure. Our 4-point economic plan is something that would be in the economic interest of the overwhelming majority of the American people. Overwhelming. The 4-point economic plan of the Center for Political Innovation is something that would economically benefit everybody in the country except for the big oil companies and the big bankers. Everybody else would benefit from it. Everybody else would benefit from building infrastructure. Thank you, David. Everybody else would benefit from building infrastructure. Everybody else would benefit from oil and gas and public ownership of our natural resources. Everybody else would benefit from strategic community control of the lending of money. Everyone else would benefit from an economic bill of rights. And that 4-point plan should be the basis of building an anti-imperialist bloc, just like Mao had his bloc of 4 classes in China that ultimately brought the revolution to China. We need to build a bloc, an anti-imperialist bloc in America centered around an economic plan to rescue the country. And that's what needs to happen. And it's going to be difficult. These small business owners, they want total unregulated capitalism. The labor movement has attached itself to the big oil and the monopolies because they want to fight the right wing that is very anti-labor. There's big divisions among the working families. Urban African-American folks, very much are tied to the Democratic Party, whereas rural folks are tied to the Republican Party, it's not going to happen quickly, but we're going to start moving in that direction. And all this talk about populism, they don't like populism, right? The Bernie Trump voters, and we're headed in this direction, right? The forces, again, the boulder is already starting to roll, okay? That this is the way things are headed. It's stopping. It's not really turning into conservatives versus liberals anymore. It's populists versus anti-populists, right? I feel like if I meet somebody and they're a Trumper, I can have a better conversation with them than I can with a Democrat at this point. Why? Because Democrats are defending the establishment and Trumpers are confused ideologically, but they are suspicious of the mainstream media. And they're, and that's kind of what we need to figure out. There's going to be populists and anti-populists. We have to be the populists, and we have to make the populism that's coming. Again, that boulder's already rolling. That populism that's coming, we have to give it a revolutionary Marxist anti-imperialist flavor. We have to let them not turn it to populism against China or populism against Venezuela or populism against Russia. We have to give the populist ball that's rolling, we have to point it in a direction of being genuinely revolutionary and anti-imperialist. That's what we ultimately have to do. We have to develop a socialist movement and a socialist current that gives voice to the mass populist sentiments and pushes this boulder that's going to be rolling with great momentum down the hill, pushes that boulder that's going to be rolling down the hill in a direction where it can have an impact and hit, and the world can change. That's what we ultimately need to do. That is our task. We need to figure out how the populism, the coming populist explosion, can be pointed in a direction that will lead to a whole new America for working families and won't just lead to society imploding. Right? That's what we need to do. We need to make ourselves an object of history. We need to intervene. We need to intervene. That's what we need to do. We need to intervene. And that is what we need to do. And on that note, folks, we are going to wrap this up. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. Good night, everybody. I agree, John. Good night. Good night, everybody.